Hello again, and welcome to part 3 of your online CME or CPD module in creativity. Again, I'm Chris, and I'll be walking you through my third lesson here. Part 3 is called Creativity in the Health Professions Classroom. So the objective of this lesson is to translate what we discussed in part 2, which was more foundational, having to do with dimensions of creativity and theories of creativity, and the state of creativity in educational systems. And I would like to, in part 3, translate what we learned in part 2 into the specific health professions context. So, to get us started, I have an activity planned that should get you primed and thinking about how we can use this in the health professions education. So, on here, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 objects. So we have a paintbrush in a paint can, a stethoscope, this is a nasal cannula, and then finally a flashlight with a light on. And for the activity, I want you to take the time and think about these objects and think about when you're completing this activity, you can think about how you can have many uses for these objects, how many varied uses you can have for the objects, unusual uses for the objects, and how you can add and improve on these uses that you've made up for these objects. So I want you to think of many uses for the objects, varied uses for the objects, unusual uses for the objects, and how you can improve on these ideas. Ideally, I'd like you to think of the uses within your own health professions context. So if you're a physiotherapist, having to do with therapy, if you're an emergency room physician, how you could use these differently or multiply within your context. So pause the document or pause this presentation, take a couple minutes, and think about these objects and how you can use them in your work setting in all of these different ways. Okay, so the reading for this module is a very interesting reading called Giving Color to a New Curriculum, Body Paint as a Tool in Medical Education. When you read this article, I think you'll find it interesting and a little surprising. That's what I thought of it. And I'd like you to think about, when you're reading the article, what surprised you about the study and what it made you think of creatively within your own field and how you could go about studying education in your own field. And the second thing I'd like you to think about is how does this idea facilitate creativity in the students themselves. So again, the focus of this course is creativity as a core competency within medical professions. So I'd like you to get thinking about what a course such as the one designed in this study can do for fostering creativity in students. So you can pause the presentation and then do the reading and then think about those questions and come back to the presentation. Okay, now that you're done the reading, I'd like to talk a little bit about the constructivist classroom. So in the last presentation, I discussed briefly constructivism, having to do with one creating their own thoughts and giving meaning to their own learning, as opposed to information just being transmitted into the brain. So I was thinking about how creativity can be fostered in a classroom, and I've come up with the constructivist classroom and how it fosters creative thinking. Something we're all very familiar with is problem-based learning, and I think it's important to re-emphasize this because from a creative standpoint of view, it encourages collaborative and creative approach to solving problems. And problem solving is something that we'll talk about within this whole module, and problem-based learning is focused evidently on a problem, and it does so in a way that encourages students to be creative in their different approaches to it. The second thing in a constructivist classroom is a collaborative interprofessional teamwork. So this is a creative result through varied professional collaboration. So sometimes we engage in interprofessional work because we want creative results to emerge, and the different perspectives from different people can occur within this creative setting. So these are two ideas that you can use to translate to a constructivist classroom. Next topic I'd like to cover is divergent teaching strategies. In the previous lecture, we talked about convergent versus divergent concepts within learning and discussion. And now what I want to talk about is some teaching strategies that can facilitate this within the classroom. So without having explicitly known it, I'm just going to flip back here to the activity we did, and I asked you to devise many uses for an object, varied uses for an object, unusual uses for an object, and how you can improve on those objects. And you'll see here that I've actually got keywords put up within Divergent Teaching Strategies that are fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. And those questions that I asked in that activity at the start correspond very well to these 4 important tenets of Divergent Teaching Strategies. And important ways of characterizing creative thinking. And I think that these are great terms and something that I'd like you to carry with you throughout your teaching, because they characterize very well what it is you're looking for in terms of creative processes. Next topic I have within Divergent Teaching Strategies is how you can get there. So the classic approach to having creative thoughts emerge is brainstorming. And this is brainstorming without any criticisms or judgment. This is brainstorming where everyone inputs and all ideas are considered good and they're put down on a paper. And the second teaching strategy I wanted to introduce you to is this concept called SCAMPER. And what SCAMPER stands for is substitute, combine, adapt, modify, eliminate, and rearrange. These are based on Starko's textbook, which we've discussed earlier, and this describes a process where you take divergent teaching strategies and you pare them down to effective and concise solutions to a problem. That leads well into the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is creative problem solving. Creative problem solving we can think of as a go-between. At one end we have divergent thinking, and then at another end we have convergent thinking. And we can think of creative problem solving as a go-between those two things. So as opposed to going from divergent thoughts to trying to just converge on one central thought, creative problem solving offers a bit of a go-between, or the practical link between what's unorganized and what's organized. And creative problem solving is supported by brainstorming and SCAMPER, as we discussed, and any strategy that works on creating or focusing these creative ideas. So focusing strategies apply there. In the classroom, how do we apply? So some applications that I have personally thought of in the creative classroom, and ways to apply these concepts of creative problem solving and divergent thinking is having varied assignment choices for students. So as opposed to having strict criteria that may not work for different creative minds, we have varied assignment choices. Second, we can have open discussions and brainstorming occurring. So in a problem-based setting, this facilitates that very well. And then finally, it's important to have a supporting environment so that divergent thinking is not squandered and creative processes are treated as very important. So that concludes the slides and the content that I have for part 3. I hope you found this interesting and useful. In part 4, we will explore creativity within the clinical setting, which is really the crux of this presentation or this course, as the clinical setting translates best to how we measure ourselves in professional practice. So thanks very much. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.